Okay, hey guys, I'm Tom from SFB Games. I'm going to be talking about my game Haunt the House Terrortown today. SFB Games is just myself and my brother. We've been called the Super Flash Brothers for the last 12 years, I think, but since we decided to become a legitimate company, we wanted something else a little bit less embarrassing, so we went with SFB Games. We've been trading as that company since the middle of last year. We made a handful of Flash games over the last 10 years. All our games so far, up until the beginning of this year, have been Flash games, and it's all just been myself and my brother. We've done some client work for people like the BBC, and our current game that we're still working on after 2.5 years is also a Flash game, but it's on mobile and tablets, but it's been compiled through Flash. It's called Detective Grimoire, and we had a pretty successful little Kickstarter at the end of last year. That project is wrapping up now, so that's finally very nice. And our most successful Flash game to date has been a game called Haunt the House. You may notice the similarities there. So the reason I'm here at all is that last year, the beginning of last year, I entered a game hack competition with my brother. We all went to Pinewood Studios where they film Harry Potter, and we sat in a room for 24 hours straight and made a game. It was just myself and my brother on our little team, and we made a game called Monkey King Spring. And we were incredibly surprised when Sony awarded us Best Game in Show, which came with a lovely glass trophy, which is sitting on my brother's shelf somewhere. And it also came with a Vita dev kit as a prize and the offer to make any game we like. I tweeted about this prize and then collapsed into bed afterwards because I hadn't slept for 24 hours straight. And when I woke up, I had a direct message from Ricky Haggett, who's from Honey Slug in London. He's a fellow indie dev. And he said he knows a guy who is looking for indies to work on their new PlayStation mobile platform. That guy turned out to be Shahid, very nice chap, and he pitched us PlayStation Mobile and said they had a little bit of funding to help out with kind of starting up the process and learning. So we said, absolutely, let's do it. PlayStation Mobile, if you haven't heard of it, which a lot of people probably haven't, is essentially Sony's answer to the App Store. So for $99 a year, you sign up, and you get to publish your game through Sony, and it works on the PlayStation Vita, which is cool. You get physical buttons, and you're actually in the PlayStation Store on the Vita. But then also a bunch of Android devices. Most of them are the Sony phones, but you'll see the HTC One series as well down the front there. Not all Android devices, just PlayStation certified Android devices. It's running essentially mono VM. You're writing in C#, and Sony wrote a mono VM for Vita and forked to the Android one that already existed. So it is now pretty stable. And you write the game in PlayStation Mobile Studio, which is essentially just mono develop, and Sony has skinned it and added their own tools. So if you've used Unity, chances are you've used this tool already. And it's available now. You can go sign up. They opened it at the end of last year to the public. After we'd been working with it for a few months, and the actual store itself is curated by Sony, so you have to go through the Sony QA process, which is actually very good, to be honest. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's curated by them. There aren't that many games out right now. There's maybe 40 or 50 games in the store, but because of that, the average price is actually a little bit higher than it is on the App Store, because the quality is kind of, there's a high baseline of quality, because Sony will only let through that kind of game. So the game I'm talking about today is the sequel to the Flash game, which was released in 2010. The Flash game was in time for Halloween, and this is the PlayStation Mobile version. It's the same core mechanic. I'll show you that in a second in a video form. And it's you fly around as a ghost, and you possess household objects, and you use them to scare people out of the house. There aren't any houses this time. There's 4 separate buildings instead of just the one house in the Flash version. And there's different areas and a lot more content this time. So let me run the trailer, if I may.
We begin our tale in the dead of night. In this hour of darkness, something is stirring. A restless spirit Something disturbs his peaceful slumber.
So where was I? Slideshow, hooray. So the background art eventually was done by my brother, but initially the concepting and all the initial background art was done by our friend Catherine Unger, who went to university with my brother. She produced these lovely kind of ideas for us in terms of color palette and layout. You can see her work at the top there, and then my brother took that from, she drew it all in Photoshop, and he took that into Flash and made it all vectors so it could scale up to any size. And then we export out. All the animation is done in Flash, which is obviously our tool set. My brother won't learn anything else. And I'll talk a little bit how we did that in the end. All the layout, all the kind of data about the game, you can see kind of where people can walk or the lines there. It was all laid out in Flash, again, a tool we know, and exported out using custom tools. All the music was done by our friend Raphael, who's doing the music for Grimoire already. He's a guy in Switzerland, and he does incredible music. And we got some live session musicians as well to record a lot of the soundtrack. The soundtrack turned out to be a bit of a problem in the end because PlayStation Mobile will only let you play one music track at any one time. The music's all designed so it can layer up and you can crossfade between them and it works perfectly, but you can't do that in PlayStation Mobile right now, which is a real shame. And you can't even play music from a position other than the start. So you have to start the piece of music from the beginning every time you go to a new area, which is a real shame. Also, sound effects have to be WAV files, which means that they're huge in memory, and there's a very low memory ceiling, so we had to dump half of our voice acting because we just couldn't fit it in the runtime memory, which again is a real shame. So the animation itself was done in Flash. You see here's one of the animations. It's a 35 frame animation, and it's quite big. So if you tried to do that as full frame PNG sequence, it would be bigger than the maximum texture size, which is silly. So actually what I did was I wrote a custom exporter so my brother could animate it, and then it picks out individual parts and tries to find the absolute minimum amount of pieces it needs to reconstruct that entire animation, and spits out those pieces as PNGs, which I then pack as a texture packer, and the animation data on top of it as well. So that animation and two other animations for that object and the still state actually all compress, so yeah, the tool's written in Flash, all compress down to that much. In terms of the actual texture, and you can kind of see the parts there, and the entire spine is just made of repeating pieces, and then the animation data is spat out at the end. We started using XML because I like pain, but it doesn't run very well on the Vita. It's really slow at reading in XML, so I actually turned all our XML data into custom binary formats in the end because it read it a lot quicker. Working with Sony was actually really good. Like the communication we had with them was spot on. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were really supportive. When we had some really kind of low-level issues, they actually put us in touch with one of the Sony engineers who was building PSM, so they were super helpful, so I absolutely recommend working with them. In terms of marketing and stuff, we really just went the indie route. We tweeted about it, we got our friends to retweet about it. We put out a little trailer, which you saw obviously. We used the press kit thing, which Rami from Blambeer built, and we emailed that around along with some press codes. We got a really nice Eurogamer review, probably the nicest thing he possibly could have said about the game, so that was really lovely. But we only got EU press codes at launch, so we could send it round to EU sites, but we couldn't send it to North American sites. We only got those last week, 4 weeks after launch, they finally came through, so that's a bit of a shame. In those 4 weeks, we've sold roughly 1,100 copies, and we get a £1.68 cut, which means we've made £1,850. In terms of PlayStation Mobile, that's good. The problem with PlayStation Mobile, of course, is that hardly anyone has a Vita. The people who do have Vitas are all in Japan, and the Japanese games market is impenetrable to Western developers. We can't even get in contact with anyone in Japan in terms of mobile press sites or anything. It's really difficult. So, and no one owns the Android device as well, which is a real shame. So what we're doing in the future is, in time for Halloween this year, I think we're going to port it over to proper iOS and proper Android natively, all through Flash, possibly with their Stage 3D stuff, and get it out on a real app store and actually have some people play it, which will be really nice. But it's available right now on the App Store and on the PlayStation Mobile Store, sorry. And we're in the Indie Showcase. Come by and play it. I've got a couple of devices. I hacked it onto some non-PlayStation certified Android devices, which is very easy. If you've got a rooted device, you can absolutely get it. Come play it. Thank you very much.